Once regarded as the largest aircraft carrier ever built by humanity, this ship was concealed behind such an impenetrable veil of secrecy that even most officers and sailors of the Imperial Japanese Navy never saw its true form. In the minds of Tokyo's military leaders, it was the final card that could reverse a war whose momentum had turned decisively against them. Shinano was expected to save an empire sliding toward collapse. Yet, in a cruel twist of fate, less than 10 days after leaving port, it was sunk in the darkness of the open sea by an American submarine, becoming the largest warship in history ever destroyed by a submarine. The brief encounter between a colossal giant and an invisible hunter left behind a haunting question. What caused the ultimate symbol of the Imperial Japanese Navy to fall so quickly? By late 1944, the Pacific War had entered its most brutal phase. The Japanese Navy, once the undisputed master of the seas, was now suffering one devastating blow after another under relentless American attacks. The disaster at the Battle of Midway in 1942 had nearly erased Japan's carrier strength, with 4 frontline carriers sunk in a single day. Pushed to the brink, Tokyo was forced to unleash its final secret weapon. That ship had never been designed to carry aircraft. It began life as the hull of a super battleship of the Yamato-class. But as the war evolved, the massive hull was converted into what would become the largest aircraft carrier in the world at the time. Stretching the length of 3 football fields and displacing more than 65,000 tons, it resembled a floating city more than a warship. On paper, it was a formidable machine of war, a top speed of 27 knots, a range of 10,000 nautical miles, and the capacity to carry nearly 50 aircraft, with dozens more in reserve. Although it featured an extensive underwater anti-torpedo protection system, the rushed construction forced engineers to make fatal compromises. The original 16-inch armor plating designed for a battleship was reduced to roughly 6 inches, an unseen but deadly vulnerability hidden beneath the deck. On November 19, 1944, at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, the ship was officially commissioned amid an atmosphere of both excitement and tension. The celebration was short-lived. An American B-29 reconnaissance aircraft flew overhead and captured rare photographs of the vessel. The news quickly reached Tokyo, triggering fears that Japan's greatest secret had been exposed. Command of the ship was given to Captain Toshio Abe, a quiet but highly experienced officer. Resting on his shoulders was not only the lives of his crew, but the fragile hope of the entire Japanese Navy. His orders were clear. Immediately move the ship roughly 300 miles south to the Kure Naval Base for final completion. On the other side of the ocean, beneath the cold, dark waters, the American submarine USS Archerfish was silently tracking its prey. Under the command of Commander Joseph Enright, the submarine had previously allowed valuable targets to slip away. This time, it would be different. Enright vowed that the massive quarry would not escape again. At 5 p.m. on November 28th, the supercarrier Shinano departed port under the protection of a famed triangle of destroyers, Hamikaze, Yukikaze, and Isokaze. Aboard was a mixed community of more than 2,300 people, naval personnel alongside civilian engineers. Even as waves struck the hull, the sounds of welding torches and clanging cables echoed through the ship. They were engaged in a desperate race, completing the final details of the vessel while it was already underway. Concerned about the inexperience of his still green crew, Captain Abe initially planned to sail during daylight hours. However, the absence of air cover forced him to choose darkness as his shield. After departing Tokyo Bay, the formation adopted a zigzag navigation pattern, a standard procedure to evade submarine attacks, but fortune did not favor them. Nearby, the American submarine USS Archerfish silently surfaced. On the opposite side of the battlefield was Joseph Enright, an officer eager to redeem himself after past failures. When he spotted Shinano's massive silhouette through his binoculars shortly before 9 p.m., he knew this was his chance. Despite the risk of revealing his position, Enright ordered continuous radar tracking, fully aware that the submarine would never be able to keep pace with its prey if it submerged. A chilling question flashed through his mind. Could a single submarine stand a chance against a steel monster like this? Just 1 month earlier, American forces had required 19 torpedoes and countless bombs to sink the battleship Musashi. On the Japanese side, the ship's radar also detected an unusual signal. Though he recognized the danger, Captain Abe remained composed. In his assessment, a lone submarine posed little real threat. Only a coordinated attack by multiple submarines could possibly bring down a warship of this size. At 10:45 p.m., a lookout reported sighting an American submarine on the surface. One destroyer immediately turned to pursue it, against orders. Abe commanded it to return. He suspected this was merely a decoy, a familiar trap designed to draw the escort away from the main target. Shinano suddenly altered course toward the south. Abe believed superior speed would allow them to shake off the shadowing enemy. Archerfish pushed to its limit, 18 knots. The crew hurriedly sketched the outline of the target, but by around 11 p.m., the Japanese ship vanished into the night. Old memories resurfaced. Enright did not change course. He gambled that the ship would soon return to its original heading. If he was right, time would be on his side. Minutes dragged by heavily. Then, at 11:22 p.m., one of Shinano's propeller shafts overheated. Her speed dropped, exactly to the maximum speed of Archerfish. At 11:40 p.m., believing the danger had passed, Abe ordered the ship to turn west. Immediately, USS Archerfish, now positioned south of the target, reacquired the radar contact. Even so, the distance was still too great to launch an attack without being detected. Growing increasingly frustrated, Enright transmitted a message to Pearl Harbor, reporting Archerfish's position, course, and target information, hoping other American submarines in the area could coordinate. The transmission was almost immediately intercepted by the Japanese. On the bridge, Captain Abe heard the unfamiliar signal and became even more convinced of his suspicion. The submarine stalking them was not alone. Unfortunately, the hastily completed warship lacked the equipment needed to accurately determine the direction and distance of the intercepted signal. As a result, Abe mistakenly believed a group of American submarines was lying in wait to the north, preparing an ambush. At 2:00 a.m., a panicked Captain Abe ordered an emergency turn to the southwest, restoring the very 210-degree circular course Enright had been hoping for. The massive carrier now steadied on a heading directly toward him. Enright quickly adjusted his submarine's course, cutting across Shinano's new track. At 3:05 a.m., USS Archerfish submerged and took up its attack position, stabilizing at a depth of 60 feet. Water flooded the torpedo tubes, and the torpedoes were set to run at a depth of just 10 feet. Enright issued the order, leaving some members of the attack team visibly puzzled. A 10-foot setting was unusually shallow, but Enright was not guessing blindly. He recalled that a year earlier, Rear Admiral Fife had told him that if one wanted to attack an aircraft carrier, the aim must be directly beneath the waterline. Moreover, Enright knew that his Mk-14 torpedoes often ran deeper than their preset depth. At that very moment, the situation aboard Shinano suddenly changed. For hours, the crew had been hearing continuous radar pulses from the American submarine, but now there was complete silence. Captain Abe immediately realized that the enemy submarine had submerged and that an attack was imminent. In an effort to shake off the pursuer, he ordered another emergency course change, turning south. Unintentionally, this maneuver fully exposed Shinano's broadside to Archerfish. At 3:13 a.m., the distance between the two vessels closed to less than 2 miles. USS Archerfish descended to periscope depth and carefully slipped through the defensive screen of the escorting destroyers. One destroyer passed within roughly 10 feet of the submarine, its propeller wash violently shaking the boat. Fortunately, the nearby destroyer's sonar system was damaged and could not function effectively. USS Archerfish finally broke through the escort screen and, once the surface grew quiet again, slowly rose to periscope depth for a final check. Shinano filled the periscope lens. Without hesitation, Enright ordered the first torpedo fired. The firing key was pressed firmly, then the second, third, and fourth. 8 seconds later, the crew rapidly reloaded the tubes and launched 2 more torpedoes into the darkness. With his eye fixed to the periscope, Enright witnessed the moment of impact. 2 blinding flashes erupted along Shinano's starboard side. Without pause, he ordered the submarine to dive to a depth of 400 feet, preparing for depth charge attacks. At the same time, 2 additional torpedoes struck the carrier's hull. The massive supercarrier shuddered violently on the surface as piercing alarm sirens echoed throughout the ship. On the bridge, Captain Abe felt the impact instantly. The ship had been hit by torpedoes. The situation was grave, but not yet catastrophic. In theory, 4 torpedoes should not have been enough to sink a warship of Shinano's size and armor. However, when Captain Abe looked out from the bridge, he saw the sea tilting, the protective armor breached, and a cascade of damage reports pouring in. Each hit was devastating. The torpedoes had struck high on the hull, just below the waterline, where Shinano's armor was weakest. The first torpedo ruptured an empty fuel tank and a refrigeration compartment, both flooded immediately. The second destroyed the starboard engine room, allowing seawater to pour in. The third struck boiler room number 3, killing everyone inside and causing flooding to spread into boiler rooms number 1 and 7. The fourth pierced the starboard air compressor room, crippling damage control station number 2. Each strike, though at shallow depth, was devastating. The war machine once thought unsinkable was being rapidly swallowed by the sea. By 4 a.m., Captain Abe could barely remain standing. Shinano's list had reached 13 degrees and continued to worsen. Gripping the bridge railing, he ordered full countermeasures to stabilize the ship. Below decks, chaos reigned as damage control teams struggled to contain the flooding. However, hundreds of panicked civilians and the presence of Korean laborers, who could not understand Japanese commands, severely hindered rescue efforts. In desperation, Captain Abe ordered the engines to full power, not only to escape the lurking submarine, but also in the hope of beaching the ship before it was too late. Ironically, this decision only accelerated Shinano's sinking. At 18 knots, seawater surged more rapidly through the breaches below the waterline. By 6 a.m., the list had reached 20 degrees, and the portside seawater intakes had risen above the surface, robbing the ship of its ability to self-balance. Soon after, the freshwater system collapsed, and the boilers shut down one by one due to lack of water. Shinano could now barely move, creeping forward at a sluggish pace. In an attempt to reach shore, Captain Abe ordered the destroyers Hamikaze and Yukikaze to tow the carrier, but the sinking giant was far too heavy. The towing cables snapped violently, whipping across the deck and narrowly avoiding serious casualties. As dawn broke, Shinano continued to drift slowly. In the 5 hours since being torpedoed, it had traveled only about 36 miles. One compartment after another succumbed to the rising seawater. At 8 a.m., Captain Abe made a final effort, ordering water pumped into the portside boiler rooms in hopes of countering the worsening list. The ship steadied briefly, but the sea would not allow it. By 8:30 a.m., the situation had completely spiraled out of control. The starboard hydraulic pumps, already under immense strain, were fully flooded. At 10 a.m., more than 1,000 crew members crowded onto the deck, clinging desperately to the railings. By then, the ship's list had exceeded 20 degrees, and seawater was beginning to flood the lower levels of the superstructure. There was nowhere left to escape. Unable to utter the formal command to abandon ship, Captain Abe instead said, "Everyone, withdraw and save yourselves." At 10:18 a.m., the 71,000-ton supercarrier rolled to starboard and slowly slipped beneath the sea. Air trapped inside the hull expanded rapidly, triggering an explosion that dragged hundreds of crew members into the water, sending them down with the ship. Captain Abe and his senior officers chose to remain aboard and go down with the vessel to the very end. In the end, the number of dead far exceeded the number of survivors. The official search and rescue operation ended at 2 p.m. Of the 515 people aboard Shinano, more than half perished. 1,455 were lost at sea. American submarine USS Archerfish, the vessel that had delivered the fatal blow to Shinano, quietly disappeared into the vast Pacific Ocean. Shortly afterward, U.S. forces intercepted a Japanese radio message in late November, confirming that Shinano had been sunk. Naval analysts estimated Shinano's displacement at between 59,000 and 72,000 tons, making it the largest warship ever sunk by a submarine. The U.S. Navy later declared Enright's mission the first of its kind in World War II, and the most successful submarine patrol in terms of tonnage sunk. In recognition of his achievement, Enright was awarded the Navy Cross. The sinking of Japan's aircraft carrier, Shinano, dealt a devastating blow to the Imperial Japanese Navy. The ship was central to plans to rebuild naval air power. Its destruction carried not only strategic consequences, but also inflicted a severe symbolic blow to Japanese military morale. To preserve morale, the Japanese government kept the incident secret for months. Survivors were quietly transferred to facilities near Wugang, kept out of public view. Shinano's history is filled with contradictions. It was the largest aircraft carrier of its time, yet also the shortest lived. It was a bold gamble, reflecting a desperate shift in the thinking of the Japanese Navy. The mid-construction conversion into an aircraft carrier, combined with unsealed compartments, an incomplete damage control system, and an inexperienced crew, led to catastrophe. It was not torpedoes alone that sank her, but unfinished construction and the pressure to put to sea before she was ready. Strategically, Shinano's loss did not alter the course of the war, but symbolically, it shattered the illusion of a revival of Japanese naval power. For decades, naval engineers, historians, and strategists have studied the case of Shinano, drawing bitter lessons. The danger of overconfidence, the weight of bureaucratic pressure, the risks of hasty decisions in wartime, and the reality that even the largest, most heavily armored warships can be sunk if the smallest weaknesses are ignored. In the end, Shinano never fulfilled her mission, but she left behind a profound warning for history.